Welcome to Chapter 1 of Health Promotion and Disease Prevention. Again, I'm Jeremy Whitaker, the instructor for the course. Now, there isn't a lot to talk about in this first chapter as it's about 6 pages long, so we'll just go ahead and dive into it. As you can see, the first bullet is fairly obvious. Changing behavior is hard, and it takes a lot. It comes from a lot of different angles on this. You have to look globally at what influences a person in society down to what motivates individual choices. And as public health practitioners, we have to try to lean on all of those levers. As the next bullet says, this isn't a psychology class, but it's kind of not a psychology course. Psychology, sociology play a part of this because we're looking at the behavior of populations and how populations make choices, and then try to make basically healthy choices easier for people to make. And again, to do that, you have to change laws, and you have to change availability of, basically making healthy food easier to get to and exercise easier to get to. You need to make it easier for people to say no to cigarettes. Again, there's so many factors that come into play when you talk about a person's health. And so that really leads us into really the final bullet of this chapter, which is the ecological model, which is probably the most important concept of this course. Change in behavior is not one factor. It is multifactorial. You have to change many things in a person's environment to get to make healthy choices, the ones that people make, at least most of the time. And again, the levers you have to lean on are personal and provide direct service. They, again, are that kind of interpersonal, family relationships. They are, again, where they work, where they go to school, what their community looks like, what the laws of their county, state, and country are, how well funded the programs are. There are so many things that you have to take into consideration that influence how a person decides to live their life. So looking at an example of the ecological model, and again, this is something you're going to have to do for an assignment. So this example would be for tobacco control. And so looking at the individual level to help one person change their behavior, you could offer them services to help them quit smoking. Probably the most important thing to prevent smoking is teaching children refusal skills in 4th grade, because that way they know to resist peer pressure and can say no to those first cigarettes, which is absolutely vital. As people get older, they're less likely to pick up a cigarette for the first time. It's very difficult to get somebody over the age of 25 to start smoking if they've never smoked before. So that's at that level. The next level, the family level. You could work with parents to talk to their children. You could provide information for non-smokers to, again, help them work with their spouse. If they have a smoking spouse, and what they can do to be supportive, again, those kind of supportive home environments. At the community level, you could have schools and organizations do non-smoking pledges, where we get smokers say, I won't smoke in my home or my car, which lets children know that that's not an acceptable behavior. And sets a positive social norm. It also reduces, of course, exposure to secondhand smoke among non-smokers. Another community level thing you can do is train doctors to help provide an effective tobacco intervention, because a doctor is going to see many, many people in the community, smokers, non-smokers alike. So again, that is a valuable resource. At a cultural level, this is where you start getting into these larger scale kind of campaigns where you provide targeted information to cultural groups who have a high risk of smoking, such as immigrant populations and the LGBT community. So you can create ad campaigns, you can do targeted brochures, again, reaching out, of course, culturally appropriate materials to that population. And from a policy standpoint, again, trying to change laws and ordinances where you restrict how far from like zoning, how far from a school that tobacco can be sold, or how they can be displayed, if they can be behind the counter, if they can be in plain sight or hidden, or if there can be, how much advertising can be across the front of the building, those sort of things. Of course, there's tobacco, the cost of tobacco, which is the tobacco tax. Iowa has a $1.36 tobacco tax. Teens and young adults are very price sensitive. So as that tax raises, the amount of tobacco they buy lowers. In fact, a 10% increase in price results in a 4% decrease in consumption. So again, price and tobacco go hand in hand, and is one of the most effective ways to get people to quit smoking, or again to price out young people from is smoking more regularly. So your assignments for this chapter, you're going to see your first assignment is a resume. While again it has nothing to do with the assignment, it's going to help me get to know you a little bit better and help me assess your career readiness, and just have somebody who knows what they're doing look over your resume. Your other assignment is going to be to create a graphic of the ecological model, which I just discussed. Now, I just used the tobacco example and at different levels. And so I'm looking for a graphic representation of the ecological model. There's a little bit more information in Module 1 on the assignment, but if you have more questions, again, feel free to shoot me an email. So I'm looking for that graphic. You're going to get 5 points for the graphic and 5 points for basically setting up the right ecological model out of your 10 points. Then we're going to have discussion boards. The first discussion board is going to be, again, about careers, kind of what you're doing in the program, what you're kind of hoping to get out of it, and where you're going in the future. And then week 2 is going to be about obesity, which is actually tied to the next video, and chapter 2, which discusses obesity as one of the problems. Thank you for listening, and have a great day or afternoon. Bye.